The sound of sizzling oil filled the luxurious kitchen as Chisom stirred a pot of boiling soup with violent motions. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her hair disheveled from hours of cooking in anger. Across the marble-tiled kitchen, Mrs. Margaret sat helplessly in her wheelchair, her blind eyes staring into nothing, her frail hands trembling as she tried to feel around for something to hold on to. "You're going to eat this whether you like it or not," Chisom hissed, ladling the scalding hot soup into a bowl. "I've been cooking for you all morning, and you dare tell me it's too salty?" Mrs. Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "Chisom, my daughter, I only said—" "Don't call me your daughter!" Chisom screamed, slamming the ladle against the counter. The sound echoed through the vast kitchen like a gunshot. "I am not your daughter. I never wanted to be your daughter. You're nothing but a burden in this house." The elderly woman flinched, her hands instinctively moving to protect her face. "Please, I didn't mean to upset you. I just wanted to—" "To what? To make my life miserable?" Chisom grabbed the bowl of scorching soup and moved toward Mrs. Margaret's wheelchair. "You sit here all day, blind and useless, eating our food, breathing our air, taking up space in David's heart that should be mine." Mrs. Margaret began to cry softly. "I gave birth to David. I raised him with my own hands. Why do you hate me so much?" Chisom's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it and saw Amanda's name flashing on the screen. With a cruel smile, she answered. "Amanda, you won't believe what's happening right now," Chisom said, her voice suddenly bright and fake. "Your prediction was right. The old woman is becoming more and more demanding every day." On the other end, Amanda's voice was sweet like honey, but her intentions were as dark as midnight. "Oh, darling, I told you this would happen. Blind mothers-in-law are always manipulative. They use their disability to control their sons. You need to show her who's the real wife in that house." "But what if David finds out?" Chisom asked, glancing nervously at Mrs. Margaret, who was now shaking in her wheelchair. "He won't," Amanda assured her. "He's in that business meeting until evening, right? Besides, you're just disciplining her. That's what good wives do. They maintain order in their homes." Chisom felt a surge of confidence. Amanda always knew the right thing to say. "You're right. She needs to learn respect." "Exactly. Now what are you going to do about lunch? You can't let her dictate what she eats. You're the woman of the house." Chisom looked at the bowl of burning hot soup in her hands, then at Mrs. Margaret's frightened face. "I'm going to make sure she eats every drop of this soup, no matter how hot it is." "That's my girl," Amanda said with satisfaction. "Call me later and tell me how it goes. I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself." After hanging up, Chisom turned back to Mrs. Margaret with renewed cruelty. "Now, where were we?" She moved the wheelchair roughly, positioning Mrs. Margaret directly in front of the kitchen table. The blind woman's hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold on to the armrests. "Open your mouth," Chisom commanded, holding a spoonful of the scalding soup. "It's too hot. Please let it cool down," Mrs. Margaret pleaded. "I said, open your mouth." Chisom grabbed Mrs. Margaret's jaw forcefully, causing the old woman to cry out in pain. "You will eat what I give you, when I give it to you, how I give it to you." She forced the burning soup into Mrs. Margaret's mouth. The elderly woman screamed as the hot liquid scorched her tongue and throat. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks as she tried to spit it out, but Chisom held her mouth closed. "Swallow it," Chisholm hissed. All of it. Mrs. Margaret had no choice but to swallow the burning soup. Her throat felt like it was on fire, and she began coughing violently, gasping for air. "Please," she wheezed. "Water? I need water." "You'll get water when you finish the entire bowl," Chisholm said coldly, "and you'll thank me for cooking for you." She continued forcing spoonfuls of the hot soup into Mrs. Margaret's mouth, ignoring her cries of pain and pleas for mercy. The blind woman's lips were becoming swollen and red from the heat. "You know what your problem is?" Chisholm said, wiping Mrs. Margaret's tears away roughly. "You think David will always choose you over me? But you're wrong. I'm his wife. I'm the one who shares his bed, who will give him children, who will build his future. You're just an old blind woman who should have died years ago." Mrs. Margaret was sobbing uncontrollably now, her body shaking from both pain and fear. "Why are you so cruel to me? What did I do to deserve this?" "You exist," Chisholm snapped. "That's what you did. You exist in my house, in my life, in my marriage. Every time David looks at you with love, that's love he's taking away from me." She grabbed another spoonful of the soup, but this time she deliberately spilled some on Mrs. Margaret's arms. The hot liquid caused the elderly woman to scream in agony as it burned her delicate skin. "Oops," Chisholm said with mock concern. "How clumsy of me. Let me clean that up." Instead of cleaning it, she poured more soup on Mrs. Margaret's arms and lap, causing more burns and more screams. Meanwhile, across town, David was sitting in his office conference room when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Amanda's name. He hesitated for a moment. Amanda was Chisholm's friend, and he didn't usually receive calls from her directly. "Hello, Amanda," he answered professionally. "David, thank God you answered." Amanda's voice was breathless and urgent. "I'm so sorry to bother you at work, but I'm really worried about your mother." David's attention immediately sharpened. "What about my mother? What's wrong?" I don't know if I should be telling you this," Amanda said, her voice trembling with fake concern. "But Chisholm asked me to come over earlier, and I heard some disturbing sounds from the kitchen. Your mother was crying, and Chisholm was shouting at her." David felt his blood run cold. What kind of shouting? Horrible things, David, really horrible things. I tried to intervene, but Chisholm told me to mind my own business. I'm afraid she might hurt your mother while you're away." "Are you sure about this?" David asked, already standing up from his chair. "I wouldn't call you if I wasn't sure," Amanda said, her voice filled with manufactured sincerity. "Your mother sounded like she was in real pain. Please, just go home and check on her. I pray I'm wrong, but..." David didn't wait to hear the rest. He hung up the phone and grabbed his car keys, his heart pounding with fear and rage. Back at the mansion, Chisholm had moved Mrs. Margaret to the living room, where she continued her torture. She had tied the blind woman's hands behind her back and was forcing her to kneel on the cold marble floor. "Now, let's practice some gratitude," Chisholm said, circling around Mrs. Margaret like a predator. "I want you to thank me for everything I do for you in this house." "Please, Chisholm," Mrs. Margaret begged, her voice hoarse from crying. "My knees are hurting. I can't kneel for long periods." "That's not my problem," Chisholm replied coldly. "Your son pays for this house, but I'm the one who takes care of it. I'm the one who cooks your food, cleans your room, helps you to the bathroom, and what do I get in return? Complaints about salty soup." She grabbed a handful of Mrs. Margaret's grey hair and yanked her head back. Say thank you, Chisom, for being so good to me. Thank you, Chisom, Mrs. Margaret whispered through her tears. Louder! Thank you, Chisom, for being so good to me, the elderly woman repeated, her voice breaking with humiliation. Good. Now say, I'm sorry for being such a burden. Mrs. Margaret hesitated, and Chisom yanked her hair harder. I'm sorry for being such a burden, she said, her spirit completely broken. Chisom's phone rang again. It was Amanda. How's everything going, darling? Amanda asked sweetly. Better than expected, Chisom replied, looking down at Mrs. Margaret with satisfaction. She's finally learning her place. I'm so glad to hear that. You know, strong wives have to make tough decisions. David will thank you for this someday. Do you really think so? Of course. Men need their wives to handle domestic issues so they can focus on making money. You're being the perfect supportive wife. As they talked, neither Chisom nor Amanda noticed the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. David had broken several speed limits getting home, his mind racing with worry about his mother. He quietly opened the front door and immediately heard Chisom's voice coming from the living room. Now, let's try this again, Chisom was saying. I want you to crawl to the kitchen and back. Maybe some exercise will help you appreciate what you have. David's blood turned to ice as he crept closer to the living room entrance. What he saw next would haunt him forever. His blind, elderly mother was on her hands and knees on the marble floor, her clothes soaked with soup stains, her arms red with burns, crawling slowly across the room, while his wife stood over her with a cruel smile. Faster, Chisom commanded. You're taking too long. Mrs. Margaret was sobbing as she crawled, her knees scraping against the hard floor, her hands trembling with exhaustion and pain. Please, she whispered. I can't. I'm too tired. I don't care if you're tired, Chisom snapped. You'll crawl until I tell you to stop. That's when David stepped into the room. Chisom! His voice boomed through the mansion like thunder. Chisom spun around, her face instantly draining of all colour. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. David rushed to his mother, gently lifting her from the floor. Her body was shaking uncontrollably, and he could see the burns on her arms, the swelling on her lips, the tears streaming down her face. Mama, oh God, Mama, he whispered, holding her close. What did she do to you? Mrs. Margaret collapsed against her son's chest, finally safe. David, she sobbed. I thought you would never come home. David's eyes blazed with fury as he looked at Chisom, who was backing away toward the wall. I can explain, Chisom stammered, her voice shaking. She was being difficult, and I was just trying to... You were torturing my mother, David roared, his voice echoing through the house. My blind mother! He gently helped Mrs. Margaret to the sofa before turning back to Chisom with murder in his eyes. How long has this been going on? He demanded. David, please, let me explain. How long? Chisom broke down completely. I don't know. Amanda said that I needed to be firm with her, that I needed to show her who was in charge. Amanda? David's eyes narrowed. Amanda told you to do this? Chisom realized her mistake too late. No, I mean, she was trying to help me. David looked down at his mother's burned arms, her swollen lips, her tear-stained face, and something inside him snapped. Without warning, his hand flew across Chisholm's face with such force that she stumbled backward and fell to the floor. "Pack your bags," he said, his voice deadly calm. "You have 1 hour to get out of my house." "David, please." Chisholm crawled toward him on her hands and knees, just as she had forced his mother to do. "I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. I love you." "Love?" David laughed bitterly. "You call this love? You tortured my blind mother. You burned her with hot soup. You made her crawl on the floor like an animal. That's not love, Chisholm. That's pure evil." He picked up Chisholm's phone from the floor and saw Amanda's name still on the call log. His eyes darkened with understanding. "Amanda," he said quietly. This was Amanda's idea. Chisholm's eyes widened in panic. She realized that Amanda had manipulated her, used her jealousy and insecurity to destroy her marriage. And now, as she looked into David's eyes, she knew there was no going back. "I want a divorce," David said simply, "and I want you out of this house within the hour. If you're not gone by then, I'll have security remove you." As Chisholm ran upstairs to pack, sobbing hysterically, David gently cleaned his mother's wounds and called for medical help. Mrs. Margaret held his hand tightly, as if afraid he might disappear again. "Why didn't you tell me?" David asked softly. "Why didn't you call me?" "She took my phone away," Mrs. Margaret whispered. "She said if I told you anything, she would make it worse for me. I was so scared, David. So scared." David felt tears burning his eyes as he realized how much his mother had suffered in silence. An hour later, Chisholm stood at the front door with her suitcases, her face swollen from crying. David didn't even look at her as she left. "David!" she called out desperately. "What about Amanda? She's the one who convinced me to do this. She set me up." David turned around slowly. "You're right," he said. "Amanda did set you up, but you still chose to torture my mother. You still chose to listen to someone else instead of your own conscience. That's on you, Chisholm." As the door closed behind her, Chisholm realized the full extent of what she had lost. She pulled out her phone to call Amanda, but the number was already disconnected. Amanda had played her game perfectly, destroying Chisholm's marriage and then disappearing without a trace. 3 months later, Chisholm was living in a small apartment, working as a store clerk to pay her bills. She had tried calling David countless times, begging for forgiveness, but he never answered. The divorce papers had been served, and her luxurious life was officially over. One evening, as she was walking home from work, she saw a familiar figure waiting by her apartment building. It was Amanda, but she looked different, more polished, more confident. "Hello, Chisholm," Amanda said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You!" Chisholm screamed, rushing toward her. "You destroyed my life! You made me torture that poor woman! You set me up!" Amanda stepped back calmly. "I didn't make you do anything, darling. I simply gave you the confidence to show your true nature." "My true nature? You manipulated me, did I?" Amanda tilted her head. "Or did I just tell you what you wanted to hear? You hated Mrs. Margaret long before we became friends. I just helped you express those feelings." Chisholm stared at her in shock. "Why? Why did you do this to me?" Amanda's smile turned cold. "Because David was supposed to be mine. We dated in college, did you know that? Before he became rich, before he became successful. But then you came along, with your pretty face and your innocent act, and he forgot all about me." The truth hit Chisholm like a physical blow. You planned this whole thing." "Of course I did. I called David that day because I knew he would come home and catch you. I knew he would divorce you. I thought he would turn to me for comfort, for love. But Amanda's expression turned bitter. He didn't. He's so disgusted by what happened that he won't even look at another woman. So now we're both alone, aren't we? Chisom felt her knees give out. She had lost everything. Her marriage, her home, her dignity, all because she had trusted the wrong person and let jealousy cloud her judgment. I hope it was worth it, Amanda said, turning to leave. I hope destroying that poor old woman made you feel powerful for a while, because that feeling is all you'll ever have left. As Amanda walked away, Chisom sank to the ground and cried. She thought about Mrs. Margaret's burned arms, her terrified eyes, her desperate pleas for mercy. She thought about David's face when he found them, the love dying in his eyes as he looked at her. She had learned the hardest lesson of all, that family secrets should never be shared with outsiders, that jealousy is a poison that destroys everything it touches, and that some mistakes can never be undone. Meanwhile, David was at home, gently helping his mother with her physical therapy. The burns had healed, but the emotional scars would take much longer. He had hired a kind, professional caregiver to help during the day, and he made sure to spend every evening with Mrs. Margaret, rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. "Do you think she's learned her lesson?" Mrs. Margaret asked one evening as they sat together in the garden. David was quiet for a long moment. "I hope so, Mama. For her sake, I hope so." "And what about forgiveness?" his mother asked gently. "The Bible says we should forgive." David looked at his mother with amazement. Even after everything she had endured, her heart was still full of grace. "Maybe someday, Mama," he said softly. "But not today. Some wounds need time to heal before forgiveness is possible." Mrs. Margaret nodded, understanding. She had forgiven Chisom in her heart, but she also knew that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and it didn't mean allowing someone to hurt you again. As the sun set over their garden, both mother and son found peace in each other's presence, grateful for the love that had survived even the darkest betrayal. And somewhere across town, Chisom lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling, finally understanding that the most expensive lessons in life are the ones we teach ourselves through our own poor choices. The story spread through their social circle like wildfire, a cautionary tale about the dangers of jealousy, manipulation, and the importance of protecting family secrets. But for those who lived it, it was simply a reminder that love requires protection, trust requires wisdom, and some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Never share your family problems with outsiders, no matter how close they seem. Jealousy and manipulation can destroy everything you hold dear. True friends build you up. False friends tear you down for their own gain. Actions have consequences that can't always be undone. Family loyalty should never be betrayed for temporary emotions. Be grateful for what you have before it's taken. Thanks for watching there, viewers. Don't forget to like this video, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.